I love Saluna. That's not even foreshadowing the video length. I just really, really like her. Hi, my name is Aster, and about a year ago, I made a Selûnite Paladin Dirge for my playthrough of Baldur's Gate 3 and have since fallen in love with the Forgotten Realms. Like, all of it. I've only played a few sessions of D&D in my life, yet I have multiple Forgotten Realms lore books in my room, and have been reading the wiki like it's high literature. I am not a DM, nor am I intending to be one, I just think this setting is really fucking cool. So since I have fallen into a lore rabbit hole with no hope of escape, I am subjecting my hyperfixation to people who aren't me. Welcome to the reasons that this channel even exists. Therefore today I want to yap about my favorite Faerûnian goddess, because she is the coolest god in Faerûn, and I will not be giving up ground on that. Because while Saluna is not as straightforward as she is commonly thought of, she does have so much more potential than people give her, including wizards. What I want this video to accomplish is to be part world building for fun, a celebration of Saluna's canon lore, and a look at Faerûn's polytheism on the ground. I want to treat these people and this place as something that can be as complex as the real world. Faerûn has a history all its own, one that we, an audience, don't know the full extent of deliberately, because it's a tabletop RPG where the DM is supposed to fill the gaps. So I do want to expand on things within those gaps and rewrite or introduce new ideas based on the beliefs of people in universe. Because no religion is static, and the gods of Faerûn aren't unchanging. There's also a lot more that can and should be done with them. Polytheism in folklore is never cut and dry as god of X or Y. For context, I am a history nerd with a minor in anthropology who's fascinated by world religions and cultures, special interests which I like applying to fictional worlds I'm obsessed with. You give me a fantasy setting with even a hint that there is more under the written surface, and I will start consuming it like Kirby until it becomes part of my new personality. Last ground rule. While the lore of standard D&D is incredibly vast and very dense to keep track of, I'm going to be keeping the scope of this tutorial in just to Faerûn to make sure we don't get too lost in the sauce. There's inevitably stuff I'm going to be leaving out. Stat blocks, mechanics, and overarching book lore ain't my focus here. It's the how and what people practice and believe on the ground. Because I want to play around in the gaps, I'm not going to be sticking to straight canon either. That'll quickly become apparent in the first section, trust me. So, would you like to sit down in the library with me? Much can be said about the oldest entities in the Forgotten Realms. The hidden god, elemental primordials, and other beings so ancient they're intangible to mortal minds outside of the most erudite sages or their pacted fanatics. But there are two primordial beings who regularly interact with mortals. To their faithful, and in common tellings they are the true creators of Toril and her mirrored siblings. While the Hidden One and the World Shaper set in place the Crystal Sphere, busying themselves with the totality of the universe, the Void nurtured a nascent pair of sisters, goddesses so close to one another, they believed themselves to be one. Saluna and Shar as the creator gods is a fairly common belief amongst the denizens of Faerûn. It is not a story even disputed by devout Sharans, though they may argue that the creation was a mistake or done as an act of betrayal. This video is mostly going to be focused on Saluna, but given the long history of conflict between the goddesses and their followers, comparisons will inevitably come up. This is Saluna's story by 1500 DR according to her most faithful, the Selûnites, or the Called to use their own terms. The sisters who were one awoke in a void of dusky twilight and infinite shadow in every direction. This void was a timeless nothing of chaos and pure potential for creation. Here existed neither light nor dark, warmth nor cold, life nor death, no seasons or length of time which could be measured, as none of it had been separated from the other. Here existed neither balance nor imbalance. One could even say there was no chaos nor lawfulness within the crystal sphere, as such things were not yet determined. The sisters, too, were so close as to be the same. It was in this place of infinite twilight that the sisters began to create. Their hands were the first to touch the oldest celestial bodies out in the astral, the realms of the gods and the fires of the hells, imbuing them with energy and life. They would pull from the primordial planes, studying them and learning from them as they settled the chaos into true form. As with Aber Torel, the beginnings of what would become the Feywild and Shadowfell, as the story is told by Selûnites, is forged by the hands of the sisters as the first hints of their individuality. The intentions of Saluna and Shar with how and why they form the realms has been lost. The secrets the goddesses keep from their most faithful and even the younger gods who call them Mother. The origins of the echoes of Toril, and how they came to be under their own rule of their own primordials and gods is heavily debated mystery. This is only one explanation for why they exist. It was within this sea of twilight that the first two children of the sisters were born, Chantea and Sylvanas, the Great Mother and Oak Father, they who are all of nature. Sylvanas and Chantea, as their mothers do, represent two fundamentally opposed but interconnected aspects of nature which cannot coexist in true harmony without the other. The Oak Father was born first, beloved by his mothers as the wild heart of Toril and the embodiment of the balance, a philosophical concept which underpins many religions and realm space as a whole. As such, many druids and Selûnites alike see him as a reflection of the original will of the sisters when they were once an overgod in their own right, and he has remained unchanged and unaligned, just as he was the day he first came to awareness under their twilight sky. He would take his first steps into the elemental planes. He would know the Feywild and the Shadowfell and come to understand their place within the balance. He would walk the infinite planes of the gods side by side with his mothers before they were graced with the presence of the divine. Once Chantea, the younger of the twins, opened her eyes, she gazed upon this sea of twilight and barren rock, and thus felt the first true desire to shake the realms, a need for life. Not life like the primordials and their kin, but something new and different from all that had come before. In her reflections, Chantea saw the barrenness of shadow and the wilds of the Fae and wanted both and more, to which she pleaded with her mothers. The sisters, both, would create life in excess, just as they had with the whole of the crystal sphere. The form of this life, whether it was the first mortals older than even the creator races, or their nascent ancestors, is something forever lost. However, it was then that Chantea asked for one more gift from her mothers. Into the ear of the sisters she prayed, "Twilight Mother, I ask for light so that I may know more than this darkness, and I ask for warmth to fill my limbs to nourish my children." It was this prayer which shattered the sisters in two. I don't tell you this familiar story just to rehash what you already know. Saluna and Shar's conflict past this point, how that created a lot of Faerûn's pantheon, is well-trodden ground. It can be said that all of the gods in some capacity are shards of Selûne and Shar's divine essences, cleaved off in their war to overtake the other. It's what's within this story that I want to use to make my point for this section. To the people of Faerûn, and to much of Toril, Ao is not who they acknowledge as their creator, and I have a lot of feelings on Ao and the Overgods, trust me. But instead the creator gods are Saluna and Shar, at least if you talk to the non-elves of Faerûn. I think in-universe, many elven cultures might acknowledge this story in some capacity, because Corellon and their Solajin created the fair folk and not the realm's whole cloth, but this is not exactly a realm that I'm particularly well versed in yet. The elves have pretty dense lore, and I haven't completely been able to parse it yet, so that might be a topic for another video, maybe. Though, if we go back to Saluna, her as the creator goddess is where I want to start expanding on Selûnites and their worship, at least while keeping the scope only to Faerûn and the prevailing practices on that continent, because I believe that the Selûnar faith is a mystery religion at its core, with secret rites, esoteric beliefs about the Silver Lady, and nuances to their faith that isn't found in her normal worship. What people who take her as their patron value is different to what those who worship her for her navigation or protection value. Saluna, the mother goddess, is the ground floor in understanding the cult's veneration, and it's not a path open to everyone who may patron her temple. The mystery aspects of the religion also would serve as an easy way to explain how decentralized her church is, because every sect would practice her rites in varying ways. Each would find different truths in Saluna's phases and lessons. Her character changes with the moons, so every person who interacts with her would see different sides of the goddess every single time. As her sister does, Saluna enjoys her own mysteries. Seeing the Moonmaiden as the creator god isn't only a perspective for the dusty halls of religious scholars. It seeps into the how and why Selûnites devote their lives to following her mysteries. In her capacity as the creator, she is called Moon Mother, the silver hand which guides all, and the burned mother. These epithets are reflected in most common depictions of Saluna. She is a mysterious set of eyes in the sky, surrounded by an endless sea, and protected by the 7 divine stars. By the way, there is a great video by Ed Greenwood himself where he talks about the secrets of Saluna's symbol. It's linked in the description, y'all should absolutely give it a watch. I didn't really have a way to incorporate all that into the script while keeping the narrative flow that I needed, but you should watch it. It was really good, and I like getting to hear what he has to say about the lore that he came up with. But another common motif amongst the Selûnite clergy is Saluna holding the sun aloft with a young Chantea and Sylvanus clinging to her robes. The fire burning the goddess's skin is Aminator or Lathander, depending on the age, taking his first breath. Her choice to bring forth the sun was a sacrifice, one that forever scarred her but in turn allowed all life to flourish and exist. The Moonmaiden's influence seeps into every corner of the realms. From the wilds of untouched forest to the fields of Chantea's faithful, the light of the rising sun onto the ever-flowing ebb and flow of all that is. Both good and ill are attributed to Selûne's will and grace. All things flowed from the Moonmaiden, and to the Moonmaiden they will return, is a common Selûnite phrase when remarking upon death or existence as a whole. In their eyes, it was from war, the first war between Saluna and Shar, that all creation as it exists was born. This is a view evident from all the depictions of Saluna as a warrior, clad in silver armor that resembles the scales of dragons, and holding one of her most divine relics, the Wand of the Four Moons, a relic that she used to defeat Shar both in the beginning and during the time of troubles. Frail, the Moon Mother, is not. Underestimating her has been the folly of many throughout history. While not as notoriously militant as the devotees of gods like Tyr, Helm, or Tempest, the Silver Lady commands powerful warriors and cunning spies, forces she has used more than once to bring about her will. People I'll talk more about later in this video. Other common depictions of Saluna show her as a woman simultaneously experiencing the different phases of life, often in the form of a triple goddess holding different aspects of nature or civilization, and descriptions from faithful who have met personally with the god describes her age and temperament as changing through the phases. On the waxing moon she appears as a young girl, jovial and of good humor. The full moon shows the beauty of the Moonmaiden and her militant might. Then, as the moon wanes, she turns into a veiled older woman with a countenance of grief. Lastly, the new moon sees Saluna's death at the hands of her sister. Myths recount how her body is entombed in Niflheim, within the Palace of Loss, where Shar believes she can keep Saluna, until she escapes from this realm of death in the guise of a wolf, both sisters still equally matched and as cunning as the other. Conflict and the inconsistency of existence are core tenets of the Selûnite faith. The time of endless twilight was a constant darkness, safe and secure, and the lighting of the sun introduced change and division of all things. Day from night, happiness from sorrow, life from death, it was a sacrifice that was worth taking on even if it meant the mortal realm would never know the safety of that twilight ever again. Even if Saluna burned herself, ripped out pieces of her own divine soul, and must die at the hands of Shar every month until the end of time, that still made it all worth it, because in that twilight there was never pain, nor loss, yet there could never be triumph. These philosophies would seem strange to non-Selenites, for the vast majority of people life either began with Chantea, or the beginning of the world is of no concern to them or their religious practices, and at most there is probably a passing acknowledgement of this myth with no further stock put into it. However, for the called, understanding Saluna in this way underpins their entire faith. It puts the Silver Lady both as creator and savior, the arbiter of fate, she who guides. Following her tenets is their highest calling above all other concerns, including in some cases the law. However, unlike Sharans, who solely worship the Night Singer as their supreme and only goddess worthy of their devotion, Selûnites are still polytheistic. The Moonmaiden is simply the queen of their pantheon. She has no equal within it. Even during the very brief time period where Ao received active acknowledgement in some worship, the cult saw him little more than as Saluna's father, who gave her the fibers that the Moonmaiden did weave. Saluna the Burn Mother is only one of the philosophies I see as the guiding core of the Selûnite faith. But to explore the rest, I think we need to examine the people who worship this goddess on the ground. They're the ones applying these ideas, and a religion, especially a polytheistic one, is less about the beliefs one holds versus the practices one applies to their daily lives. Examining the orthodoxy versus orthopraxy situation of Faerûn polytheism honestly could be its own video, so I'm not going to speculate on that larger discussion here. Needless to say, the Selûnar cult is largely orthopraxic in its overall structure, both in its decentralized nature and from how the goddess herself wishes for her faithful to operate on Toril. Children run in wolf masks along cobblestone streets. darting through throngs of adults huddled around the warm stalls selling food and cider, howling up at a full golden moon. There are masks of all kinds in the crowd: wolves, cats, bears, deer, all the way up to the few who dare to wear the visage of silver dragons, and they are gathered under the shadow of a massive building. Moonglow runes depicting the teachings of Saluna paint the sides of the marble edifice. A continuous mural depicting wolves hunting under a moonlit sky, priests caring for the wailing and oppressed, a ship sailing through an angry sea confident they will return to shore, and a lone child using the stars to find their way home move along the walls in an unending cycle. The people know this place as the House of the Moon. These murals mean different things to all who gather this night. Most know the basic teachings or find themselves depicted on her walls, but only those who wear moonstone upon their person press their faces against the image they need most and pray. Others leave votives upon the steps of the temple. They range from copies of travel plans, merchant ledgers, pieces of decommissioned sails cut by sailors, and wedding bands made of bone and wood, all in honor of the guiding moon as she watches over the lives of the mortals she so loves. A hush descends over the crowd as the bells begin to ring at the height of the night. Those temple doors, sealed only in preparation for this moment, open to reveal priestesses dressed in deep blue and finest silver, flanked by guards in masks and pelts of wolves. The crowd gathers in parts along the procession row. They whisper of werewolves amongst the cowed figures, of how the children of Saluna drove the servants of Malar from these lands, the hunt of the hunters, though this festival has not included a real hunt in centuries now. In the front of the procession is a woman cowled in a crown of moonlight, holding a replica of the very weapon Selûne used to strike down her sister Shar at the beginning of time. The people of Waterdeep join in this howling until the parade finally reaches the sea. In another place in Faerûn, a humble collection of hamlets sit far from any large city. This is nowhere important. These are not villages which will show up in the annals of history books or even as a landmark dots on a scrivener's map. Yet, in the dead of an autumn night, people of all ages from each village walk through a forest deep into the darkness, with only the moon and their lanterns for guidance. The people who stalk this night are those who were called to the mysteries of the Maiden. Here her worship is not conducted in marble halls, but in the wilds untouched by the hands of mortals. They follow a moon-bathed woman. Her dress is little more than a simple traveling tunic embroidered with faintest silver upon the hem, and she is guarded by clerics and a paladin. All of their boots are worn from years and years of walking the roads of the Sword Coast without end. Yet, the priestess is joyful as she sings a soft melody echoed by the called. The forest shifts around them the further they tread. Magic hangs in the air at this boundary between Shantea and Sylvanas. All of them know they are about to cross. The lanterns they carry are dimmed. From here they must continue this trek only by moonlight. Eventually they find it, an altar carved from rock into the shape of Saluna and inlaid with most precious moonstone stands at the center of a clearing. The people rejoice as they finally found their way once more. Here the full moon shines almost as bright as the sun, and melodies from bards which beget dancing, singing, and joy soon fill the air. Some sit in quiet meditation around the altar. Youngsters speak wildly of the adventures they will be called upon, and the lands the moonbathe who come through this area speak of. None of the boys and girls have ever been beyond their small towns, but their parents were not called by the Moonmaiden as they have been. Some of the youngest sit, eat, or dance with their own parents, those who have been part of the faithful since they too were young, and they wonder when it will be time to undertake Saluna's trial. But tonight is not the time for trials. It is a celebration of the life the Moon Mother sacrificed herself for and guides them through. It is a night to drink and make merry as the year closes and another begins anew. Their priestesses rising with the shake of bells grabs the attention of the crowd. Music falls to silence as her voice begins to ring out alone. The song is in a language none of them understand, but it pulls at the hearts all the same. In her hands, the priestess raises a bowl filled with white wine and milk to the heavens, and, at the last note, she pours it upon the altar. Almost instantly, a flash of white light covers the entirety of the grove. When it settles, the called are surrounded by the primordial warmth of moonfire, which drifts and dances as shades of the faithful who have worshipped here since time immemorial. A feeling like the embrace of a mother holding a newborn, the cool breeze of autumn, the warmth of the sun on your back, and the scent of moonflowers blanket the grove. All of the called reach out in joy at the blessings of the Silver Lady. Powerful magic they will remember into the months where their worship will continue, alone. In the morning, the priestess and her clerics will gather the salve left behind by the moonfire. Some will be left with each of the towns, in the hands of the blessed faithful. The rest will go with them as they once again move on from this place. The altar will be gone, not a trace left for even the most erstwhile of hunters. The Church of Saluna is one of the oldest religions in Faerûn. However, it has remained one of the most decentralized and least understood faiths on the continent as well. Quick recap to underpin this section. Salunarism is, to me, comparable to a mystery religion, a term applied to Hellenic religious sects which prioritize secrecy of their rites, the ways of their worship, and their philosophies. A basic definition, but one that is workable for this discussion. As stated in Faiths and Pantheons, the detail of the Selûnite faith are not well understood by common laypeople, and while they are respected, the religion is seen as mysterious with the details obscured from all except the called. It wouldn't be a stretch to extend this into full mystery religion territory, with a schism between the common worship of Saluna, her portfolio of navigation, comfort of the vulnerable, and general protection at night being applicable to most daily life, and that of the called, whether they be in community with other Selenites, lone practitioners, or the wandering clergy very common within her church. As I said before, Selûnites do not have a centralized clerical structure, meaning that no temple reigns supreme over any other, nor is the church hierarchical as other faiths typically tend to be. Now, they do have ranks and leaders for religious practices, however, as a reflection of their goddess's ever-changing nature, all temples and shrines to Saluna have their own distinct hierarchies, or none at all. In fact, Selûnites divide themselves based on duties or knowledge of the faith, and work more as a collective instead of a strict hierarchy. Anyone who knows Selûnites will immediately think of the House of the Moon in Waterdeep, as it is the wealthiest and most iconic temple to the Moonmaiden in all of Faerûn. But the house is atypical when it comes to Selûnism for a lot of different reasons. Given its position in a wealthy city like Waterdeep, one where connections to the nobility are a must and conformity with other more organized faiths would surely follow, the hierarchy of the house is much stricter. These Selûnites are also notably more opulent than their fellows. This picture illustrates that perfectly. While it is listed as the typical dress of a Selûnite priestess, I really think this is more emblematic of the house or other wealthy and affluent sects. It's not just Sharans and Faerûn who hold the view of Selûnites being pampered aristocrats, and it's entirely because of the House of the Moon, both because of its vast displays of wealth, and, as I would argue, their departure from regular Selûnite practices. Though I won't rag on it too much, because the house does play a central role as a cornerstone for Selûnite philosophies being written to page, training equipment distribution for the Moonbathe, and generally serving as a symbol of the Moonmaiden's power. It also holds some of the most powerful and sacred objects to Saluna. People from all over Faerûn come to marvel, receive divinations and blessings, or to simply bask in the light of the Silver Lady reflected from every window and sculpture. The called meander in meditation on the lessons of the Lady in tucked away corners of the house, and they are some of the few who are allowed into the upper chambers. Mariners, hunters, and those called on adventures study and research routes new and long forgotten through the harshest of Torio's lands and seas. Even the scions of Waterdeep's nobility know to respect the House of the Moon. Since childhood, they are tutored and guided by a strict priest in an effort to keep them worldly and attached to the plights and the needs of Waterdeep. And the house is known to host the most lavish balls on the Sword Coast, which nobles can only attend if they give up portions of their fortunes to the coffers of the temple. These coffers are then used to reinvest into the city's infrastructure and support the destitute so they can find homes, jobs, and/or enough comfort to get them back onto their feet. Anything left over is stored for a rainy day, given as coin to other temples who need it to upkeep their own services, or used to buy equipment for rituals, building new temples, given to support the Moonbathe, training soldiers, etc., etc. For the common folk of Waterdeep, their lives are intertwined with the trade that flows to the city on a constant basis. All commerce is seen as being done through Saluna's blessing, from the shipwrights who care for the vessels to the mariners who beseech her caress on the open sea, to the shops that line with goods from far over, and every tavern and hall who serves the weary traveler or sailor. If the House of the Moon is prosperous, so is Waterdeep in turn. Unlike Baldur's Gate, who worships Underlead to guard their ships during long trading voyages, Waterdeep's solution is to beseech the mistress of the tides in Saluna, hence why the House of the Moon has been the most prominent temple to the Moonmaiden for centuries. But I do want to pull away from Waterdeep to talk about the wider Selûnite beliefs and practices, so that I don't give you the false impression that only the house is an active nexus for worship of Saluna, because the vast majority of her clergy are actually found tending to small shrines and temples far less opulent, or wandering the lands as swords to strike down evil or heal the sick and mad. For Saluna's most ardent commandment to her called is for them to always treat all beings as equal and guide the lost into the light, no matter how far they may have strayed. something that often leads them into danger, but the called respond to such with a smile on their face. To start on the less dangerous end, Selûnite temples and monasteries often serve the dual faction of serving the faithful and as healing houses for the sick and mentally ill. The clergy are to give out all healing for low or no cost at all, as they see it as their divine duty to aid others in the name of the Moonmaiden. Much of the training of the called priests involves learning about all kinds of medicine. As such, roaming Selûnite clergy are regarded as some of the best doctors in all of the realms. The poor and destitute of many cities rely on the services of the wandering Selûnites, or perhaps nearby Selûnite villages with settled local priests, as they can't afford health services otherwise. Those outcast by the effects of mental illness often end up in the hands of Selûnite temples and sanitariums. If the Forgotten Realms has therapy, it's being spearheaded by the Selûnites faithful. Or, I guess, sharns, depending on what counts as therapy to you. Shar corrupting or co-opting Selûne's teachings and what her clergy do is a constant theme that will come up time and time again. Honestly, Malice Storm and the House of Grief and Baldur's Gate 3 are far more insidious than a lot of the fandom realizes. These places are textbook examples of Selûnite aid to a community, and both were/are being run by Sharans in disguise. It's a little wonder people trusted them because of the Church of Selûne's reputation. It wouldn't even surprise me if outwardly they were being run as extensions of Selûne's church with no one to oversee them because of the church being so decentralized. And Malice was definitely straight up hiding his beliefs for hundreds of years. The reason the called are so intent on aiding the unwell is because Selûne herself is said to be caught in the throes of madness depending on the phase of the moon, and her association with lycanthropy is often seen as a mental ailment just as much as physical. While the majority only know the goddess as this eternal motherly force, the called see her and embrace all sides, including sides that are dangerous or unpredictable. So if they can do that for their god, she asks them to do so for their neighbors and kin. This is just one example of how the Church of Selûne is focused on aiding the oppressed and freeing them from their oppressors. People of all stripes and backgrounds are common amongst the called. Thieves and charlatans who use their skills to steal from tyrants who hoard coin like dragons, the poor and downtrodden who see Our Lady of Silver light a path forward for them in the darkness, and entire orders of knights being devoted to culling the enemies of the Lady, are all considered equal and honored members of the church. To get a feeling for a very diverse group like the Selûnites, I want to examine the Harpers and the Silverstar class of her clergy specifically. The Harpers are such a diverse group and one of the oldest networks in all of Faerûn, so I couldn't possibly explain all about them outside of their own dedicated video. But the organization sticks well to its Selûnite roots, though she is certainly not the only god who influenced their philosophies. It is a confederation of those hailing from all walks of life, all cultures across the continent, and hardly organized within any central structure. They pair well with the decentralized nature of the Church of Selûne and the chaotic, if good, nature she expects of her followers. Indeed, the called make up a significant portion of Harper agents in many corners of Toril. They hold to no defined creed outside of protecting the downtrodden and ripping evil from the ground wherever it may seek to take root. The Harpers are well known to do this by any means necessary, theft from the nobility, subterfuge, and outright spy work, and often have to exist outside the legal framework of many nations and city-states. Though upholding the rule of law, provided it does not trample on the balance and rights of freedoms of the people, is also part of the Harper Creed. The Silverstars serve a similar function, though they cloak their operations squarely within the interests of the Moonmaiden. They are part of the class of wandering clergy within the church, yet, unlike some moonbathes, they have never been known to place down roots for too long if Selûne does not will it. These warriors are touched with the divine gift of prophecy. Selûne is regarded as the seer of all fates to her faithful, and mystics are prized as the most accurate of all the realms, even surpassing wizards who dedicate their entire lives to studying the prophetic weave, though I will touch further on Selûne's connection to fate and prophecy later on in the video. And the Silverstars use their gifts to track down and protect lycanthropes, destroy slavery networks, and oppose the enemies of the Selûne, such as the Church of Shar and followers of Mass, Cyric, and Bane. In fact, I would even argue that their success stems from the philosophies of Selûne. They would be unable to operate or be successful without the sharp wit and survival instincts the called must hone. The Church of Selûne, having been enemies of Shar for so long, dedicate their militant sects to the art of disguise, infiltration, trickery, and anything else that would give them a leg up when faced with a rival such as her. Selûnites would not have been able to last this long without tricks of their own, and the might of warriors willing to bring light to the hopeless, even if it is only revealed with blood. Selûnites do all this because of one simple reason. Their religion prizes self-reliance above all else, but it is also a recognition that a call's success must not be a selfish kind. If Selûne divines to give you power, insight, wealth, or glory, all she asks for in return is that you protect and lift up those around you, Freedom in all forms and the joy of self-expression is as sacred to a Selûne as the sowing of crops is to a Chantean. But that freedom is something that can only be fully grasped if a person is self-reliant, not alone and without community, but in full understanding of who they are as a person. Self-reliance as a virtue is impressed upon the new Selûnite from a very young age. One of the most well-known rites undertaken by all Selûnites is the first stalk. This ritual is for two kinds of the called: the young children of Selûnite communities, or lone called parents, or those who convert to having the Moonmaiden as their patron in later in life. The first stalk, as the name that I have given it, this is not a canonical name, is as decentralized as the religion it is a part of. Every community honors the path in different ways, but there are certain aspects of it that are consistent between peoples. In the dead of night, in the chill of autumn, the youngest children are led deep into the forest. Always alone, they are either brought by their parent, a priest, or simply told to walk until the forest began to speak, and Chantea's embrace gave way to the eyes of Sylvanas. They are instructed to sit until their protector is long gone, or they would have found the way back home, or they would have forgotten the way back home. Then they must make their way back, through the dark woods, and only the light of Saluna used for guidance. It is only after this rite is complete would the prospective Selûnite be fully welcomed into the mysteries and recognized as a called. I don't think enough credence is given to how difficult of a task this realistically is in a place like the Forgotten Realms, but I also don't want to give you the wrong idea that Selûne's morality, as much as that can be put onto a god, is up for question. Selûnites have very good reason to engage in this practice, so I want to give it the full attention it deserves and examine this rite in full. The first stalk is usually preceded by years of training and teaching for the young child before they are even allowed to ask after the rite. One must learn all the basics of survival out in the world from the day a child can comprehend the lessons. A Selûnite's vast knowledge of these skills, even in childhood, is what separates them from the common lay people within their community. So the question has to be, why? Why go through all this effort to teach skills and place your children in dangerous situations when the vast majority of your community, if you don't live in a Selûnite enclave, do not do this? I think the reason is multifaceted. Self-reliance is such a deep virtue for Selûnites because of Faerûn being so dangerous. It is Saluna's way to give the children a better chance of surviving, especially because a lot of the called have been or are nomads. If their minds are sharp, if their instincts are sharper, then the called can protect themselves, their communities, and strangers far more effectively. They can become pillars within their towns as healers and hunters. Saluna does not want her followers unattuned to the natural world she created. They do have many beliefs in common with druids in this respect. You are to be practical with your elf and your strength. The first stalk reinforces those lessons and those ideas. You will not always be a child. You have to learn how to stand on your own 2 feet and puzzle your way through adversity, but you must never forget that your community will always be waiting and have your back when you need them most. No matter how deep the darkness of those woods, Saluna's light will always guide you home if you have the knowledge and willpower to understand it. We also can't ignore the Sharan-shaped shadow in the corner of the room. Shar's followers have long been hunting Selûnites since time immemorial, probably ever since her sister first found faithful amongst mortals. I don't think it would hurt to have survival skills be foundational lessons for your children. Even then, not every Selûnite town or set of parents is as dogmatically strict. Some places will teach basic skills to the children, but also make sure they don't wander too far from the village that the woods get exponentially more dangerous. In this instance, the rite is more of a custom than a true test of survival. Other places in Faerûn are just as likely to take a more hardline approach, sending their children, or new called, out into the wilderness for a multi-day test, with the trade-off being they must be older before they can participate. Failure to complete the rite, or being unable to undergo it in the first place, would mean different things to different communities. I could go on longer, but I have other points to make. First talk ceremonies are probably completely different in the context of Selûnites living in cities like Waterdeep, and I can see learning how to navigate the city by yourself being a skill just as important as navigating the wilderness is to a rural Selûnite. For sailing communities, the first stalk could be navigating a river or the first time venturing out into the ocean. For nomadic groups, it would be the first time a child has to consciously help their community in moving to a new place. What self-reliance looks like to any given group or person is inevitably going to be different. Hence why Selûnites are encouraged to travel and aid their own freely. So whether the first stalk ceremony spun out of the night stalk or vice versa is definitely in universe academic debate. More importantly, the night stalk ceremony is another one of the church's most common and important rituals, one that I talk about in the story at the top of this section. This is one of the community-oriented practices of Selûna's worship, but is as important to the lone worshipper. This ritual involves going deep into the woods in the middle of the night, far enough that it feels like one has entered the Feywild, and then a night of merrymaking around a shrine to Selûna takes place. The importance of feeling connected to both Chantea and Sylvanas is rather important to Selûnites, as both are children of the Moonmaiden, and the ritual serves to keep the called connected to both. Thus, the Nightstalk moving from civilized domain of the Earth Mother into the wild heart of the Oak Father is a feature. Even for Selûnites who live in cities, they will still attempt a group or solitary Nightstalk into the wilds at least once a month. The Nightstalk is important as a method of meditation to bring one closer to the Lady of the Night, reinforcement of community bonds, a way to find joy within life, and to emphasize Selûna's not often remembered connection to boundaries. Not boundaries as in physical walls, but the metaphysical boundaries between different ideas and states of life, or even death. The Silver Lady's worship often involves the breaking down and examination of those boundaries in order to reach a true understanding of the world. How sorrow and joy might intersect, how Chantea and Sylvanas intertwine as equals as part of a whole, but still fundamentally oppose the other. The coldness of Selûna's light and guidance she gives to all those who wander, one's past and how it pushes them along the weave of fate as their threads get woven in. Crazy esoteric stuff like that. The creation of Moonfire, a primeval form of magic, during the ceremony is entirely upon the whims of the goddess, but many called will say it happens when she favors the joy of dance and song, seeing connection forming between people, or if a solitary practitioner reaches a new point of understanding within themselves. Same and similar can be said for the mystery of the night, a very sacred ritual that is only done in solitude and is completely closed off to outsiders. Most sages in Faerûn have contradictory records of this rite, to the point where some believe it and the Nightstalk are the same. They are not, because Selûnites directly deceive outsiders and lie about it when asked to describe it, or they refuse to speak it at all. This rite is done once a year and in a moon grove, secret shrines to Saluna which are only recorded in oral memories. It is only done by clerics, paladins, knights, priests, and Selûnite mystics, basically those who dedicate their entire lives to service of the Moonmaiden. In this rite, the worshipper meditates under the light of a full moon, and they do their ritual properly. Their bodies, souls, or both are said to either be lifted into the air to circle the moon, or they are cleaved from their mortal forms to go walk within the gates of the moon for a night. Selûnites do not ever speak about what they experience while being in the embrace of the lady, but the few who are willing to whisper talk vaguely of feasting with their ancestors or walking within the palace of Argentil or seeing fate itself unravel before their eyes. Anyone who does this rite has to spend weeks physically recovering from it, but all of them say each year is the most profound spiritual moment within their lives. To close out this section, I want to talk about an interesting part of Selûna's faithful, Faerûn's lycanthropes. While commonly found and thought of as worshippers of Malar, lycanthropes of all kinds have been Selûna's most fervent disciples, and some believe them to be the founders of her church. The Moonmaiden herself is mythologized as the originator of lycanthropy because she rules over her nature. This is all headcanon and extrapolation, but let me give y'all one story about the first lycanthropes in Faerûn. Deep into the mists of time, when the origin species still ruled over Toril, when dragon and elf were new and humans still traveled in bands of hunter-gatherers, there was a group of children who found themselves alone. Whether these children be human, elf, halfling, gnome, dwarf, or any mix of those who had lived in Faerûn since time before the fall has been lost, and maybe who they were never really mattered. They were children, and they were lost. Leaves crunched under their feet. They hold onto each other's hands, glancing wildly between the trunks as they look for safety. The great forest of their era was deep, thick, and ancient in ways very few places in Faerûn remain in the modern day. No matter which way the children turned, the woods twisted to keep them. Trees watch as they move through the underbrush. They feel Malar's beasts at their heels. Shar caresses their cheeks, assuring them that the darkness would only grow deeper. One of the children will call out to Saluna, grasping at her light before they lost it completely. Moonmaiden, O Moonmaiden, save us from this darkness. Lead us home. As she watches over the world, Saluna Moonmother heard their pleas. Reaching into her mote of moonlight, she sent down rays of the full moon to touch the souls of the children, drawing out their true natures and changing them into animals of all kinds. In these forms their senses sharpened, the darkness no longer confined them, and the forest itself was tricked into believing they belonged to it. For days, months, years, these children used their forms to protect each other and hunt the servants of those evil gods who stalked them. These were the first true lycanthropes, the beloved children of Saluna, and they would worship her as the first called. The name itself comes from how these lycanthropes called out to Saluna, and she called upon their true natures in turn to give them strength. To this day, the called remark on how it is Saluna who chooses them, not the other way around. They would pass along the lessons of the lady to their children, the ways of the night stalk, the necessity of keeping their minds sharp, and to always remember the safety of packs. Yet they had to always be brave and resourceful enough to find any light within the shadows should they ever need to face them alone. This is only one of the countless stories that connect lycanthropies to Saluna. Anyone can make their best guess as to why the Moonmaiden has such a storied connection with them, but her connection with rare creatures is undeniable. Some of the oldest and most devoted orders to the Moonmaiden, like the New Moon Pact and the Eyes of the Evening, are made up entirely of werewolves and werecats. Lycanthropes of all kinds are common sights in Selûnite temples and communities. Silverstars and priests of Saluna are often called by the goddess to villages after one or multiple people have been bitten or lycanthropy suddenly appears within a child. Their job here is to help get the lycanthropes to safety and help them learn how to control their powers. In the eyes of Selûnites, their condition is a gift, but only if the lycanthrope wishes to see it that way. The Church of Saluna is one of the very few institutions who retain the knowledge of cures for the condition, hence why the vast majority of the continent still believes death to be the only cure. Moonfire, created during the Night Stalks, is one of the ways Saluna herself directly intervenes. Her magic gives lycanthropes the ability to fully control their transformations for 7 months before they must be exposed to it again. Moonfire's salve is used for temporary relief. Faerûn's general prejudice towards lycanthropes is part of what causes Selûnites to be so secretive of their rites. Many a Selûnite has been accused of lycanthropy, whether true or false, and then run out of communities due to fear. Unfortunately, Selûnites have not always been kind to lycanthropes. Remember me mentioning the New Moon Pact? They were the lycanthropes Saluna herself called upon to hunt down the priests of Malar who ravaged the north and desecrated her temples. Saluna's Hallowing, the holiday about this event, was even a festival within Waterdeep I described in the story of this section. But it didn't stop the precursor to the House of the Moon from branding them as heretic and destroying their kin order, which was older than Netheril itself, all in the name of a power grab. So much knowledge about the earliest days of Salunarism was completely destroyed in the razing of the Pact's holy sites. While the order was restored in 1373 DR, there is no getting back all that history, nor any excuse for the lie that caused so much blood to be spilled. This faith can still be incredibly messy and just as prone to politics as any other. In fact, this episode was so bad that Saluna herself gave new commandments that ensured the church remained decentralized as to avoid a repeat. The last aspect of Saluna I want to talk about is one that's not really in the lore, it's more weird implications that I want to expand upon. Did you all know that Saluna is the goddess of fate and death? At least I heavily suspect this to be an old truth in Faerûn's past. Her connection with fate is fairly well established. There is a class of Selûnite priests known as mystics who are capable of divining the future and seeing all paths that flow in fate. These priests have the divine guidance of Saluna, making their astrological predictions superior to those of common people, other religious sects, and even well-studied divination wizards who have the guidance of Mystra. The Moonmaiden rules over the night sky and all astrological bodies. Fate in Faerûn is more of a tangible concept than in our realm. While astrology is a fun hobby for many on Earth, in Faerûn those well-studied in it or connected to gods such as Saluna can literally see into the future. The mysteries of the night ceremony is so secretive because its true function is to allow Selûnites to walk the paths of fate, either only for their own lives or to see the massive world events before they happen. If Saluna needs them to intervene, of course. While not every event within fate is guaranteed to happen exactly as predicted before it passes, the Silver Lady has been known to place her hand upon the scale more than once. How far her power over astrological bodies still extends from her days as an overgod with her sister is unknown to mortals and even most of the Pantheon. Indeed, Saluna's strength has waxed and waned over the centuries, and we cannot forget what she tore from herself in order to defeat Shar at the beginning of the sphere's existence. If Mistral had never been created, Saluna would have been the one who ruled over the nascent weave. At least this is incredibly likely to me. Her followers often describe the lady's divine magic as feeling primordial, akin to the cold fires of the astral sea, the roiling darkness of the Shadowfell, or the wild magic of the Fae, and so ancient it is unbound by the goddess of magic. Mystra is Saluna's ally, and still her daughter, theologically, even with her being in this third incarnation. The mixture of Selûne's light and Shar's shadow, which gave rise to the weave, is forever the binding glue which burns Mister time and time again. Shar may have been willing to kill her daughter with Siric's aid to try and gain back control over her own power, but the weave is built off of Selûne's essence just as much as hers. There was no way the Shadow Weave plan was ever going to work as Shar intended. There's just too much of Saluna in the foundation of the weave for Shar to dislodge or rewrite that inherent balance between their powers. So the Moonmaiden's magic is distinct and older than the goddess of the weave, a stance that her followers often remind Mistress Wizards of when the two collaborate. So it is no coincidence with her power over magic and the way all fate-bounded stars move via her will that Selûne has this quiet command over fate itself. My last assertion, Selûne being associated with death, is the most headcanon heavy part of this video, as if a lot of it hasn't been headcanon already, but this idea comes from the naming of a particular holiday in the calendar of Harpdos, the Feast of the Moon. While this festival period is called many things and celebrated in different ways depending on the culture and religion, there isn't any canon celebration of Selûne despite the festival's name. We know that the Moonfest is an honoring of the dead for most of Faerûn, where people go to their ancestors' graves to remember them. They tell stories of lost cities, old wars, and heroic deeds, both the mortals and gods of light. The festival's origin is murky at best. It likely dates to even before Netheril and contemporary empires rose to power. As these vast civilizations grew through conquest, the worst of those massive battles were often fought between harvest time and the coming winter. But why the moon association? Selûne doesn't really have any death associations anywhere in her current portfolio, so it might not make sense on the surface. However, and let me put on my religious studies hat, I believe this comes from the oldest remnants of Selûne's worship, and these ancient ideas can be excavated from how her and Sehen Moonbow have always been the same goddess with different faces. I know that canonically they were separated during the Second Sundering, but this era of Faerûn's religions happened before all of that. As I've overstated, Selûne is one of the most ancient beings in all the Forgotten Realms. From the perspective of the Faerûnian Pantheon, as worshipped by its people, she is the oldest, with Shar beside her. Every single portfolio the gods currently hold were once pieces of the sisters. Shar makes this apparent with her extremely long list of old aspects and how she constantly tries to keep at least partial dominion over them via her worship. So why wouldn't Selûne have the same old complexity? Remember that quote I said at the beginning of this video? All things flowed from the Moonmaiden, into the Moonmaiden they will return. I didn't just make that for flavor to explain how Selenites view her as a creator deity, but to also hint at her old connections with death and the remembrance of souls. Jurgal is also one of the oldest deities in the Faerûnian Pantheon, older than most of the gods, and he was absolutely the old god of death, but I do not believe he was the only god associated with death. Also, the portfolio thing is a really limited way to look at these guys, even just as characters. It has never been true that only one god has had full control over any aspects of creation in Toril. Limiting any of the gods so strictly to a handful of characteristics isn't even something Wizards does. But anyways, moving on. Selûne is one of the gods of navigation and has many prayers dedicated to her about guiding one through life and out of shadows, etc., etc. But she also comes up in death rites. They are very small interactions, but they do exist as part of the lore. One very tiny instance of this is a prayer in Baldur's Gate 3 where one of the tiefling refugees, Rika, prays over Canon's body after he's killed, where she asks that he go rest at Selûne's side. Almost all the gods in the Forgotten Realms maintain a place within their realms for the souls of their dead followers, and we all know how souls generally get there, but I want to take this prayer something deeper. I believe that Selûne is conceptualized, both in the past and recently again in Faerûn's modern era, as a savior goddess and a goddess of the remembered dead. She who takes in the forgotten, she who guides even in death. I take this stance primarily because of how Selûne should, and often does, contrast with Shar cosmologically. Shar as a goddess is primarily associated with loss and grief in all forms, but there is an interesting quirk in her worship that doesn't make much sense, at least to me, from the outset. Shar seeks to destroy the memories of her followers and those who seek their guidance. Yes, it's been said that she takes these memories as power into the Palace of Loss, but what is the aim of making people forget their grief? What does the goddess of loss gain by people being healed of their loss but being incapable of remembering it? She's not like Dendar, whose cosmological purpose is to consume nightmares until she can destroy the sphere. For her followers, it does make sense. Shar often destroys the person they once were and leaves them as a new someone only loyal to her. Sharans intentionally do not wish to remember anything outside of the Dark Lady, but what about everyone else? As with the whole House of Healing or Grief shtick, I really think that this is another undermining of Selûne, her domain, and the deeper truth of her portfolio. To explain, I need to get into real-life parallels for just a moment. Selûne is partially based on the Greek goddess Hecate, the goddess of the moon, magic, crossroads, the night, and many other things. Hecate is an immensely powerful goddess within Greek mythology. She serves as the protector of the home, a guide to the lost, a triple-bodied goddess of many faces, she who guards boundaries, and is one of the many goddesses associated with the underworld. Some of those may sound familiar. Selûne is a guide as well, the goddess of navigators, one who knows all secret paths, so it wouldn't be hard to see her as a guide to the spirits of the dead. Faerûnians, before Netheril and after, likely believed that the goddess of the moon was the one who collected the spirits of the dead and brought them to the city in the Fugue Plain, or directly guided her own followers, and the followers of many gods who dwell there, to the gates of the moon. The gates are unambiguously Selûne's realm. She is queen, and all the other gods who dwell there are her children, allies, or lovers. And many in-universe cosmological models, the infinite staircase, the nexus through which all the realms and times are connected, found its base here and is overseen by Shan Da Kul, the god of travel and exploration, and all routes inevitably lead back to the gates. This means that any god traveling between realms or the souls of the mortal dead must travel through the gates or will pass close by on their journey. As one of the creator goddesses, it was likely Selûne who set Jurgil to task as the original lord over death, and as goddess of fate, she would know the ultimate end of the realms. Thus, we need a scribe to record all that ever was and will be. It was her sacrifice that allowed the world to exist, and thus, all gods and mortals are her children, even if not literally. Sahé-Mumbo is also associated with death within the Elven Pantheon, and she maintains the cycle of reincarnation that the elves go through in order to find perfection. If elves connect the moon with the cycle of death, many elven cultures even celebrate the Feast of the Moon as a festival honoring ancestors like other peoples. I don't think it's a stretch to say that Selûne originally had a domain over death in human cultures as well. She would be the goddess of the remembered dead, the one who guided souls to their gods or home to their ancestors, and the one who healed the grief of those left behind after a death, especially one that was sudden, like a death from a war. This is why Shar would want people to forget their grief. Selûne cannot heal what people cannot remember, and a soul might be lost to the Shadowfell, Shar's domain, for a time, if mortals and gods alike cannot remember them. The most important thing Selûne is the goddess of hope. She is the hope for a better future, the hope which inspires action, the hope which nurtures caring and empathy for others, and the hope to find peace and rest after death. In her light, the people of Faerûn are able to move beyond their grief and loss. The Moonmaiden is a healer, savior, and she reaches out to every single person in Faerûn, especially if they are spurned or forgotten by the majority. Death is one of the worst losses a person can face in their life. It can destroy their entire world and be something in which they lose all hope of knowing a better future. This kind of loss is exactly where Shar finds her followers. The Dark Lady is the antithesis of hope. So why would Selûne stay silent on the topic then? I don't believe that she does to her followers and within the folklore of Faerûn. Selûne's light, the moon itself, guides the souls of the dead, both to their final resting place and allows them to return to Toril during the Feast of the Moon. And that's the reason the holiday is called that. The ritual of remembrance is about honoring the dead, including the grief and loss of their passing just as much as the joy of their life. It's a ritual you cannot do if you cannot remember them. Hells, Sharans celebrate this day as the Rising of the Dark, where they sacrifice someone and then plot to bring about their lady's wishes into the coming year. If they are intentionally doing something that day to counter Selûne, this festival is important to Selûne. The Feast of the Moon is definitely something that honors the Silver Lady, whether the people of Faerûn at large remember it or not. She doesn't need a bespoke festival if the holiday belongs to her on principle. Therefore, the Moonmaiden's original associations with death are something that was forgotten by Faerûn at large over time. Same as how Selûne's warlike persona was also softened, but I do not believe that Selûnites forgot. They know the lady who guides. They remembered the burned mother who saw the fate of the realms, yet still sacrificed so much to allow it to exist. They remember the goddess who embraced the souls of the dead and inspired the Feast of the Moon, originally celebrated in her honor. While she isn't a goddess who rules over death to the majority of Faerûn anymore, she still is to her followers, to those who know the goddess and the infinite mysteries of the night. Well, that was a long one. Selûne is one of my favorite fictional deities, so she deserves as much love and care. Putting a little bit of thought into fantasy worlds and religion is one of my favorite things to do, so definitely expect more from me in the future. I do have a lot of books on my shelf, and maybe there's some people who want me to read them, Coming back to Faerûn is on my mind, but if you like Monster Hunter, Pokemon, Fire Emblem, or anything else, we might find ourselves sitting down together again. So, subscribe, like, comment, all that jazz. If you like me yapping about lore, I'd love to hear it. If you disagree with any of my points or feel like you know some things I missed, I'd love to hear that too. I want to thank my friends and partner for encouraging me to sit down and finally make this thing. The months of figuring out how to make my first long-form video were worth it because of y'all. Well, that's all from me. Thanks for sitting in the library with me. Bye for now.